Imagine for a second that you've been working in the games industry for more than 2 decades. You've cut your chops at one of the most prestigious studios in the UK and eventually earned enough from your time there and the game projects you've been tinkering on in the background to go full time. Using your interest in history and your education in economics and politics, you eventually come to establish an extremely popular franchise of games that let players toy with the fabric of national politics. From that success, you have enough in the bank to start taking bets on local studios and begin publishing games between projects. Not only that, but over the recent years, you see one of the games you designed indirectly sprout an entire subgenre of games with little or no credit for it. How do experiences like those shape the way you think about making games, what lessons stick with you after decades in the industry, and what happens when your ideas end up influencing an entire genre without most people realizing where they came from? Cliff Harris is someone I've known in the industry for quite a while, and while we don't necessarily always see eye to eye on our approaches to game development, he's someone whose opinion and insight I have great respect and admiration for. I've spoken to him many times offline about different philosophies to game design and programming over the years, so I'm thrilled that he agreed to come on the show and chat about those philosophies, no matter how controversial or unorthodox they might be by modern standards. You'll see what I mean as the conversation unfolds. All right, well, I think one of the things we should just start with, Cliff, is maybe, and you know, it's up to you to choose how detailed you want to go into this, but I would be interested, I think, for people to hear sort of how you got started in games, because if I recall, you worked at Lionhead for a while, but was that the first place you worked in games?
No, but I'm unusually old for someone in games. I'm closer to like Peter Molyneux's age than like a lot of people, because I'm from the ZX81 era, which means nothing outside the UK, but it was the home computer. Everyone talks about the ZX Spectrum and the games industry is because of the Spectrum, but before that there was the ZX81 in 1981, and that had 1 kilobyte of RAM.
Yeah,
not a gigabyte,
kilobyte,
not a megabyte. 1K, and no monitor. You had to use a TV, no color, no sound, no persistent memory of any kind. So if you coded a game and you played it, then like when your parents came home and watched TV, they'd unplug it, and if you wanted to play it again tomorrow, you'd have to code it again.
Oh man!
But the thing is, like that, the Spectrum was 16K. Spectrum was a lot better, and it had color and it could go beep. But I'm from that generation, so I started coding when I was 11, 10 or 11. Okay. And that should have been an autism diagnosis right there. But like there wasn't, no, I'd never heard of it. So I'd been coding a very, very long time as a hobby, and then I got massively sidetracked and I was a musician for a while.
Right. Yes, I remember this. Yeah. I remember you telling me this. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I played a gig last week, as but the first one in 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I kind of went off computers a little bit. I just lost interest slightly between like the 16K ZX Spectrum and then like the 386. So basically Windows 3.1, the end of DOS, really. I'm still playing games. So I then got back into computing around about then, which is still really early days of the UK games industry. I mean, like there's Bullfrog, but that's it.
Has Frontier popped up yet? Has like the BBC Micro thing?
Oh, were they still? They were Frontier from the very beginning, weren't they? Yeah, because that was
Elite, the original Elite. Yeah, Elite on the BBC Micro, if I remember, which was a UK only computer, right? Yeah.
It was also on the Spectrum. I played it on the Spectrum, which it didn't look as good. But yeah, that was around there. But you know, Frontier was tiny, and initially, like Bullfrog was tiny. We're talking studios of like 4 people. Or something,
kind of like what independent teams are now. You know. Yeah,
totally. So I kind of stopped coding for quite a while because I learned BASIC. I learned ZX BASIC, which is kind of rubbish. So then when the 386 came out, I decided to learn C and C++, and I learned that from a mail order floppy disk course on Teach Yourself.
Yeah, no, YouTube didn't quite exist just yet, right? Like
YouTube, like you know, didn't have anything. And I did evening classes in advanced C.
Wow.
And but I couldn't get a job. The idea of getting a job in the games industry then was laughable because there really wasn't one unless you happened to know Peter Molyneux, you know, or it was very small. So I just tried to get a job as a coder, and I couldn't get a job as a coder. And I'm sure, like young people just graduating now will go, no, has it always been like this? I couldn't get a job as a coder because I didn't have a job as a coder. And which was annoying. So I ended up in IT. So I worked in IT support for like 10 years.
Okay.
But I was then programming as a hobby. I was trying to write games. And then I made a bunch of really shitty really early indie games where it was kind of like people would send you a check through the post and it was like that kind of really early internet where pre-Steam, obviously, pre-YouTube, pre-all of that. And people were very nervous about buying something over the internet because it was frightening. So I was doing that sort of thing, and I'd made a bunch of games and they hadn't sold many copies because hardly anyone was on the internet, right? But then I got a job at Elixir, which has kind of been forgotten, really.
Yeah, the name rings a bell.
The name rings
a bell.
Well, it's funny, really, because at the time they were like mega rock star depths.
What was some of their big titles?
The title that inspired, they were on the front cover of Edge magazine, which was a very pretentious, trendy UK dev magazine.
That's still going, isn't it? Or did Edge?
I can't
remember.
I
remember seeing Edge on the tabletop of one of the game studios that I worked at not that long ago.
Oh yeah.
So I think Edge is still around. I'm gonna have to look this up now though, because so many of these.
It probably sells 6 copies or something.
Let me double check.
But it was a big deal at the time. Like if you were
I think
in
they're still
Edge.
around. Yeah, I think they're still around. Yeah, no, it's still
very,
even
very
kind of in the
good.
UK, it's still a big deal if you're in one of those magazines. But I can imagine back then, definitely a lot more prolific.
To be on the cover, I mean, what was funny was like this company, Elixir, on the front cover of Edge, and they hadn't released a game yet. And they were all like posing, looking cool in Camden. And their thing was that they had an infinite polygon engine. So there was like an infinite number of polygons. And this is back when the polygon count was a thing you bragged about. And it all sounded insane and crazy. And I thought, I want to work
I'm
there.
in. Damn it.
I'm in. It seems a totally unrealistic prospect. I'm in. So somehow I got a job there. It was very, very hard to get a job there. Loads of interviews and everything. I got a job there on the basis that I had shipped games. And this is kind of a relevant thing that only if you've been around a while, like you know what it's like, that there's a lot of people who talk a lot about, you know, they're game devs and they talk a lot about their game, but they've never shipped anything.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to ship a game. It's stupidly hard. So there were all these people in this company, and they all had PhDs in artificial intelligence, and they were the top. They had this thing, they go to Oxford and Cambridge each year, and they take the top maths geniuses, right? And then there was me, who didn't even have a proper degree. But I'd shipped stuff, which is how I got a job there.
Right.
But it's mostly famous now, that company, for the fact that when it eventually went bust, after I'd left, the two of the guys, well, a bunch of them, at least 4 of them actually, ended up with a new company, which is DeepMind.
Ah, okay.
Which is now Google, Gemini. So yeah, I mean, the head of the studio, but it was only about 20 of us, probably less, was Demis Hassabis. And my boss, my line manager, was Dave Silver, who was the guy who did like AlphaGo, and basically kicked off the modern AI industry. It was all kicked off because they beat Lee Sedol at Go, and then suddenly you've got OpenAI and all that. But it was kind of crazy, being there. And it's funny because he's now like Demis is one of the most famous people in the world in AI. But if you read about him, no one ever mentions that. Like he started off working for Peter.
Right. Yeah, I'm just looking up the Wikipedia page right now, and the name rings a bell because they did Evil Genius, right? That's what I'm.
Yeah. They were doing that when I was there, but I was on a different project, that ended up not.
But you can, and then even looking like some of the early games, like you said, sort of AI systems and stuff. So it makes sense that that's where they would end up going, but that's interesting. So then, but you did then end up working at Lionhead, right? Because I saw your name in the credits. I remember I was playing The Movies, which is one of my all-time favorite games, and I remember watching the credit sequence, and I saw your face. I was like, wait a minute, I know Cliff. What the heck?
I've got it's not on my wall. I purged my wall of stuff because I put charity stuff on my wall. But I've got like a sort of fake gold this thing. Thank you for your work on The Movies somewhere in a drawer somewhere. I worked at I worked at Lionhead. I went from Elixir to Lionhead, and worked. Peter Molyneux ran the studio, but I didn't interact with him that much. A little bit, and I was one of the very early coders on The Movies. I think there were 3 of us coding when I joined, and I was there for 3 years. I think, getting increasingly sick of it. Mostly because, I didn't know back then that I was autistic, which I found out later, and had various other things. And I'm basically not very good at working in a normal
big groups
office.
Of people.
I think it's quite hard to exist in an office environment if you're autistic. But if you are, but you don't even know it, then it's even harder because you get irrationally confused and angry and annoyed, and you don't even know why.
Yeah, I can imagine back then, before it was really a thing that people were super aware of as well.
Yeah, I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea. So I always found it quite tough. But it was a brilliant place to work, Lionhead. It was a night. Don't get me wrong. Working for Peter Molyneux is impossible, right? And the best part, he's excellent, and I am way more like him than I would like to admit. But and the thing is, it depends where you've worked, right? Like the 2 studios I worked were Elixir and Lionhead, and they were both run by kind of megalomaniacs who loved games. They weren't just trying to make money, and they weren't just trying to be famous.
They just want to make a really good game by all means necessary.
Yeah.
Passionate to a fault kind of thing.
Yeah. Which when you work there on a daily basis, you're like, what? We can't do. You can't do that. We have to throw everything away and start again. And it was chaos, but I learned a lot about marketing through being, 2 of the most attention-grabbing people are probably Demis and Peter back then. I learned this kind of one trick that's obvious, but you've got to really internalize it. That basically when you're being interviewed by press, almost everything you say will be boring. Yeah. It's not interesting. And you're especially if you're at some big event, you're the 20th interview of the day. So you have to be able to say something that is shocking, unexpected, amazing, deeply personal, something that makes people go, whoa, hang on, what? and the trouble is, Peter's go-to for that would be, in the game, you can do this thing. And he'd just make it up. And then 100 people would have their next 6 months' work changed as a result, which is chaos. But obviously, that means every time he opened his mouth about a game, it was on the front cover of everything.
Right.
Because you don't want to, no one's going to write a story saying strategy game devs say that there will be a lot of strategy in the game. who gives a shit? But if Peter Molyneux says, like, you know, you can eat an apple and then you can throw the apple core away, and then when you go back years later, the apple tree will have grown. And then some poor coder, not me in that case, has to actually code that.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird to think about, because like that now as a feature, even back then, yeah, that would have sounded insane. But now you're saying, I'm like, I mean, games kind of do that now. Like, it's which is crazy to think about.
But not with a Pentium chip and 8 megabytes of RAM. They did.
Yeah, no, it's insane. Well, I mean, look, you know, like it's funny too, because I think you talk about needing to work under those conditions, and it works out from the sounds of it when the games that come out are well received, right? Like, you know, Lionhead worked on most of their games are critical successes, and which is weird because I think the movies wasn't, but it's a cult classic in terms of like a game that everybody fondly remembers and wants sort of. I maybe I'm speaking personally there, but like I've seen lots of people talk about the movies frequently, and I'm sure we'll hear things in the comments about this too, because that is a very, for me anyway, being like my background in filmmaking, that was a very influential game for me.
Yeah, of course,
at the time.
yeah.
Like the fact that stunts and effects, and you could make all that. We've spoken about this a bit in the past before, but I remember just having the camera tools in there and all of the scene building. Like, it was revolutionary. Like, it was crazy, that stuff in the game at the time in 2006. Was it crazy?
God, I have no idea. But the movies was a game that was being made by Lionhead to make money. I mean, he was into it, right? Mm-hmm. And he would promise things. But I think that the thought was, obviously, if you made a game about movie studios, kind of like a bullfroggy management thing, you know, it would make money and it'd be a success. And the more experimental stuff was often like AI-driven stuff that I guess he was less sure of. And so the movies was on the more conservative side of like what Lionhead did. True. Stuff like Black and White was very hard. And Fable, they were doing Fable when I was there. I remember playtesting Fable in my lunch break. And Fable, it's funny, like people who aren't in games, like especially if you're in a big studio, you kind of assume like this bunch of organized people working really hard who all know what they're doing. And it's an absolute shit show, you know. Yeah. Like whole games were cancelled and studios disbanded because like we needed to pull people in to work on Fable. I think I was one of the few people that never did anything on Fable. But yeah, it's chaos behind the scenes. It always is. But having said that, my experiences were, like I say, Elixir and Lionhead, and they were both trying to do stupidly ambitious things, which I still think is the valid approach. I think if you play it too safe, you can just be forgettable, and especially for indies. Like if you're a massive, if you're a huge studio, you can crank out some boring game. And because you know you've got however many million to market it. But if you're indie and you want to get noticed, then I think like the Peter Molyneux approach is better, and it worked for me, of being a bit of a loudmouth about something that no one else is doing.
So you're saying is that coming up with a very specific hook that is potentially literally a hook that's appealing to people? Because I think I would push back on that a little bit, where what you're talking about and what we spoke about just before we start recording is some of the risks of that is you end up spending 5 years making a video game, which I think indies can't afford to do, right? And I've had a couple of conversations.
You definitely can.
I've had a couple of conversations recently about sort of trying to take more shots on goal and making smaller games releasing faster, especially in the current Steam climate. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, because I agree with what you're saying. I think you do have to have something that makes, whether that's an art style or a mechanic or a twist on the genre. But I guess, how would you take what you've just said and kind of convey that to people who are thinking, you know, how do I make that work in the current climate without spending 5 years working on a specific game? Because, you know, budget just isn't there for that kind of thing for a lot of people.
I think, yeah, I'd forget the budget, right? You can... I did a game that was basically The Sims, right?
I want to get into that in a bit. I'm very, it's on my list of things to talk
about. I did a game that was very similar to The Sims and originally inspired by this little bit of contract work I did for Maxis, which was called Kudos. and it did very well. I mean, I don't know. I mean, but a long time ago, I remember I made $20,000 in a month, right? And I thought, oh my God. And like back then in the indie dev community, that was a stratospheric amount that people were like, oh my God, well, how have you managed this thing? Because it's pre-Steam and all that, right? So I did a life simulation game, right? With no money and just me doing everything, right? And you can do that. You can do The Sims on a budget of nothing, okay? But you have to cut your cloth. So it was 2D and there was no animation. But it's still The Sims. Mm-hmm. It's still, here's my character. I'm making decisions. I'm running their life. I'm making life choices. These are the outcomes. This is 10 years of my character's life and what they've achieved. Now, it doesn't sell as well as The Sims, and it doesn't look as good as The Sims, but it probably took less than a year.
Was that full-time? Because I was going to ask you, I think if I recall, when you were working at Lionhead, you were starting some stuff for Positech. Was that right? And then you left to kind of go full-time at Positech?
It's a bit more complicated than that, because originally when when I was an IT contractor, because back then, this is a long time ago, I basically did nothing. So
okay.
I had a lot of spare time. So like in the evenings, I would think about my games. And then in the evenings, I would kind of make games and weekends. So I had this bunch of games. Then I worked at Elixir, and that was very full-time, and I didn't have time to do anything. And then there was a little gap and I knocked out another game. And then when I was at Lionhead, I already had some games out there. So when I quit Lionhead, this is something that I should mention really, because a lot of people, I've met people over the years who go, I've quit my job to go indie. And I sort of think, Jesus, don't do that. And the trouble is they used to watch like interviews with people like me a long time ago and sort of think, oh yeah, Cliff did it and he makes loads of money and all that. But I did it in a really safe way. So when I stormed out of Lionhead, there's a tale I am not telling. But when I crashed and burned out of Lionhead, I was earning more money from my back catalogue than my salary. B, my wife had a full-time job, and C, we had no kids. And D, I had this offer, which I turned down because I had a job from Maxis to go and do some work doing prototypes for them, which I was then able to immediately email the guy back and go, hey, guess what's happened? I can now do that work. So what I'm saying is when I quit my job to go full-time indie, it was a very easy and very safe bet for me. And I fear for people who like save up for a few years or like remortgage their house and then they go indie. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it's tough nowadays.
Scary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit in that situation, thankfully. I think we'll see. I just need a break at the moment. So that's kind of my shot at the moment is just like, I just need a break at the moment. So, and hopefully the YouTube stuff keeps me going for a bit. That's kind of my fallback is like, well, I'm doing all right on the YouTube side of things. So it's not quite enough to get me through, but like, I've got a plan. Let's put it that way, without getting boring.
But also, but like even back then, like I used to be I had the revered at the time qualification that I was just a Microsoft certified systems engineer. So I could go back to IT, and like these days, that's a meme, right? The IT guy earns nothing, but back then, the IT guy earned I earned like 54 grand, which probably these days is, I don't know, at 90 or something. I don't know.
Maybe it's probably still 54. Let's be honest.
Oh yeah, I know, but like the equivalent.
I see it like for inflation wise. Yeah.
Yeah. Because suddenly every major company was massively dependent on computers, and they needed mission critical engineers, and the certification system was really lagging, so hardly anyone had this. So what I'm getting at is like I was a real wimp. I did it really safely, and I didn't like borrow money. I did something really old school that is not done anymore, it seems, by indies, in that I made a shit game. And it earned a bit of money, and I spent that money on a slightly less shit game. And if I like showed screenshots of my game through time, they look better and better because I had more money.
So it's lots of smaller games, safely made.
Yeah.
Get that out, learn a thing or two, move on, do the next thing. I just came off. The last episode was talking to Code Monkey, and that's exactly the advice that he gave. So it seems like it's still kind of the way to do things.
Yeah, but you also have to feel your way to like your genre, right? Because like an hour ago, I was playing Battlefield 6. I love first-person shooters. I've played them since they existed, since Wolfenstein and all that. I've played a ludicrous number of hours. I love those games a lot, but I don't make them. I love strategy games too, and I do play a fair bit of them. But I've flailed. My first game was like multiplayer Asteroids with a little bit of like buying and selling. And then I did like games where you race around in cars, and they were terrible. And then I did a strategy game, and that sold the best. And then I found that it depends like on the circumstances, but like when I was first doing stuff, doing a strategy, you could do a strategy game that would provide an enormous amount of gameplay without a big art budget.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that because I have no artistic skill whatsoever, my games I make will be code heavy. So strategy games are good for that.
Right.
Whereas like, and I'm not a writer either, right? So I am 90% coder, 10% everything else. So, and it took me a while to work out that meant I should make games like Democracy and stuff like that. And also working at Elixir and Lionhead, when I worked on like massive code bases of that stuff, and I loved it. And I thought, this is the kind of stuff I want to keep coding, AI and stuff like that. So it takes you a while. I mean, like people who go indie and they've got their big idea for a game, get it done and dusted quickly, because you might find that your big idea for a game is the game you want to play, but not the game you want to make.
That's great. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, that's very different. Sort of, I guess, learn your strengths kind of thing, like hone your skill to learn your strengths, figure out the things you're good at in order to understand the sort of genre that you can make an achievable scope, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's slightly different now because like you've got Unity and you've got the asset store and you've got stuff like that. I'm kind of quite anti that because I think it's making everything look a bit generic. But it's huge leverage.
Yeah.
Like the game I'm doing now, which is Ridiculous Space Battles, like my art budget for it, controversially, I use AI for some of my art.
Okay.
Which is kind of like...
We can get into that. I'll make a note.
Yeah, loads of people unsubscribe immediately. Only for some little bits of it. But the majority of the art is like asset packs that I license, bought. I'm not using Unity, so it's outside of Unity. It's 3D CG or whatever. But of course, back in my day, right, in the early days of me making games, there was no asset store, and there was no Unity. So the kind of game I could make, it had to be, I can code all of it, including the engine, and there can't be much art because I can't buy. I'd have to hire an artist, which now I do. Not this game, but previously I've always hired a bunch of artists. So. Yeah, I think what a lot of indies do now, I think, is they have this idea for a game. They work out how much that will cost, pretending there's some studio. And then they try and get that money from publishers or relatives or selling their kidneys or whatever. And I think just don't do that. Say, I want to make this sort of game. I've got this much money. I'm going to make the best possible mashup. Because ultimately, like Vampire Survivors, I don't know anything about it, right? But it doesn't look like it costs millions of dollars.
Right.
Of like
well,
artwork.
And this game that just came out, Mecha Chameleon, right? It's huge. Sold millions of copies on Steam. And I think it was made in about a month.
Yeah, exactly, right. So, and like Minecraft is the ultimate example, right?
Yeah.
He didn't spend money on art. It's not necessary.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people have this fantasy that they want to make, back in the day, the meme when I was in game dev was that everyone wants to make World of Warcraft as their first game.
Yeah, that's still the meme.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Okay,
Don't worry,
cool.
yeah, it's still the meme.
That's good.
Now we want to make an MMORPG with open world survival craft elements. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's crap. I mean, like what you should do. I mean, like people won't even know the game now, right? But back in my day, it was make Space Invaders, right? And people think, it's trivial. Okay, you do it tomorrow then, and then make something a bit more complicated and blah 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 blah. Because stuff that looks simple is not.
Yeah, there's still lots of things to learn from the design of those games and the edge. It's a lot of, for me, when teaching this kind of stuff, it's also a lot of the things you don't think about in the UX and UI and just in the way that certain edge cases are handled. And that's the stuff that really teaches you the chops of things you need to consider when you're making video games, is all of the edge case situations and how to handle them to make them feel smooth and frictionless. And I think that's the same sort of thing there. I recently did a free course on YouTube here teaching asteroids, and it was actually the first time I'd made asteroids, and so I had to solve some of these problems and trying to make it. And I was like, yeah, this is a good beginner project because you have to deal with some of the things and you can put your twist on it to make it interesting. And so I would say that too, if you are learning, definitely make Snake, Pong, Breakout. Those are still great games to cut your chops on.
To me, modern game development is just a travesty to me, because it's just ridiculously different to when I started. Because when I started, I mean, we're 1K of RAM, right? But even when I came back to it, which would be just before Windows 95, obviously you had to code your own engine. The only engine you could license was Unreal, and it was $1 million per game. And you had to know Mark Rain probably in order to even do that. It was not a thing. So when I was at Elixir, they had their own infinite polygon engine. I've seen the source code. I know the magic. And Lionhead had their own. Each game at Lionhead had its own engine. Each game at Elixir had its own engine. And it was not considered weird. It was considered normal. Because you would have a lead coder who knew how to code. Whereas I kind of fear that we've got to a stage where there is this myth. I mean, look, if you want to do Battlefield 7, right? Yeah, good luck. You need 50 of the world's greatest graphics engine geniuses. There's no denying that. But if you want to make an indie game, especially if it's not 3D, the reason I don't do 3D is I don't want to write a 3D graphics engine. Mm-hmm. And I hate using other people's code.
You're just a purist, but if you want, essentially.
I'm not. I don't do assembly language.
Okay, that's true. All right, touche.
I have been known to look at the output. Yeah, well, the thing is, I think there are multiple reasons. I will build a case for it very briefly. I think there's an intellectual case that it's just fascinating to know how everything bloody works.
Yeah, I agree with that. 100%. Yeah.
Here's a pixel on the screen. How did that happen?
That's the tempting thing for me I think every programmer gets to a point in their life, especially now, game developer at least, gets to the point where it's I could just build my own engine though. You hit a friction point with Unity and it's just I wouldn't have this if I'm building my own engine, but then you find all the people that are just building their own engine and aren't releasing games. They spend 2 years making their own engine.
Oh yeah.
And so I want to. I didn't want to interrupt. So I want you to keep going and make your case for it.
No,
but I will
cool.
add the thing of I don't recommend people do it just because that's what you spend your life doing. Whereas from what I can tell, given your history, you've made an engine and you've just continually been building that engine over time.
It's way more hardcore than that.
Okay.
Because even my buddy Jake, Jake says hi, by the way.
Okay. We'll get Jake on at some point, I'm sure. He's just very busy doing
he's too famous now.
He's too famous now for this. I'm too low level of a podcast at the moment.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But even he thinks I'm mad on this point, and he knows me very well, right? So I did a game a long time ago called Gratuitous Space Battles, and I wrote a game engine for it, and it does space battles and lasers and particles and everything, right? And I thought, I want to like update it just for fun. And I'm not as organized as the average autistic person. So I couldn't find a hard drive that had the latest version of the game on it. I found a hard drive that had like an older version. I know these days everything's on GitHub and everything, but I didn't do that. I'm pre-GitHub, apparently. So I was hunting around, and I had some hard drives that were some like older format that I didn't have the cables for, right? So I just rewrote the engine from scratch.
As you do.
Because I couldn't find the hard drive with the old engine.
Wow.
And it's great. Like the new engine is great. And I've done that a lot. Right? Because at one point I did an isometric game production line, and that's a bit different.
I was okay. Yeah. Of course, you'd have to do a different thing for that. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, that was pretty different. And the game I'm most known for, which is Democracy, is a weird thing because it's basically a neural network, but again, coded just from scratch. So I've written engine stuff a lot, and of course, when I was at Elixir, that had their own engine, and same with Lionhead. So if you do it a lot,
you have the like building block fundamentals to pull in.
You kind of know it.
Yeah.
And these days, I have to say, I think it's never been. This is another part of my building an argument. It's never been easier, right? Because if you're coding an engine yourself from scratch when the only resource is books, that's hard, right? But if you can just say to Claude, why does this not work? And it can explain to you in any way you want, kind of the basics of like why this is a poor choice of an algorithm for what you're trying to do and all that kind of stuff, right? What I would not do is say to Claude, build me a game engine and just trust that it works. Because at that point, if you're going to be that careless, you might as well just use Unity, right? Mm-hmm. Although then you have to pay money under certain circumstances that I can't even be bothered to know to Unity. But yes, I mean, like one of my reasons for doing it is intellectually, it's really great fun. I love it. I love engine code. Another reason, though, is it gives you total freedom. And to be completely fair to people who write stuff like Unity, I would not want that job. Because whatever game you're working on, you look at the Unity code base and you sort of go, it's a bit frustrating that it doesn't do what I want, right? And the thing is, everyone using Unity thinks that because they're all doing totally different shit,
generic.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you try and write code for like scheduling graphics draw calls when someone could be making Factorio, World of Warcraft, Pong, or anything, some random thing, right? It's hellish, right? So by definition, Unity is a huge compromise, and even Unreal is, and any engine is. So if you code your own engine, you have infinite freedom. So you can make like global optimizations. And for example, like the particle system in my new game, I know what I use particles for, and I know what I don't use them for, and I know what my use cases are, and I know how much memory I've got because etc. Even though I'm doing a 32-bit app, so I'm limited. It turns out it's not a problem at all. You know what the game is, right? The Unity devs have no idea what you're making, but you know, so you can go in there and just carve out big chunks of stuff you don't need because, you're in control. So I think it gives you a lot of freedom, and I think because you have that freedom, it gives you a lot more creative and design freedom. Because if your game, say your game is basically a particle system, the whole game is basically maybe the game is about sand, right? You can do that without any compromise. But the minute you're using someone else's engine, you're kind of like, well, the engine collapses if you've got more than 1 billion particles, But you have complete freedom, and I think that comes across. I see a lot of games these days, indie games, that start to look similar in a way I can't really articulate, but it's because everyone's converging on like the polygon count and the particle count and the shader style that makes sense and is really easy to do in Unity.
Yeah, like the natural limitations of the engine show them surface after at a scale of games that are out there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think like people sometimes point to things like Dyson Sphere program, I think was done in Unity. But when you talk to devs of games like that, I won't mention the devs I'm thinking of, but like you sort of say, oh, really? You did it using Unity? And because it seems like not like that they've done that, and they often say, yeah, we just ended up pulling everything out and recoding it because we needed to stretch it in this or that direction. And then at that point I sort of think, well, why are you putting up with the massive overhead of being dependent on some third-party company with ambiguous licensing and stuff like that? And that's one of my other main things. Like, I'm an indie game developer, very much so. So I don't have a publisher. I don't have Unity. I don't have. I pay a subscription for Claude, and for my web host for my website. But that's it.
Yeah, just keeping your costs as low as possible, essentially.
Well, low but also predictable.
Mm-hmm.
Like I own my engine, so the engine devs aren't going to come along and sort of go, yeah, actually, you need to pay a lot more.
That's always the biggest case. I mean, okay, so then in that case, what are your thoughts on Godot? Because it's open source, people can fork it, they can change and improve it. So as a starting point for developers, then, because like there is a massive overhead to learning how to make your own engine, right? And especially if you want to design,
is there though?
If you want to design and make games, right? And you don't want to get super bogged down in the weeds until you get to a point where naturally you're interested and want to focus on that stuff, right? But like, do you think Godot is a good sort of compromise middle ground there for people who are like kind of interested in, and if they want to, they can more easily fork it and make the tweaks they need? Or would you just be like, no, just make it from scratch?
I mean, personally, my like preference and my brain chemistry lends itself to like just code everything. Like, I'm annoyed about DirectX, and like I've had long conversations with people who had like worked on the code there. Like, there is a function in DirectX that to do with loading in one of their own file formats that's at least 100 times slower than it should be. You can write around it. You can write your own version, and it's just brilliant. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't know much about the other engines because I just don't care anymore. But like if you get the source code, if there's no licensing and you can do what you want with the code, that's excellent. Do that. You've still got to learn. Like, if you looked at my engine, I'd be embarrassed because I keep changing naming conventions and it's just a shit show. But like, it's the way I think. Everyone thinks slightly differently. They have a different paradigm for how they store data and process data and how they compartmentalize the components of an engine. So mine is all me. So, I know what's in the engine and what's in the game, and I know what would be bundled with what, and what bits are slow and what bits are really fast, because I did it all. But yeah, I totally understand how Godot is very, very appealing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess a lot of people just like, there's a lot of tutorials for Unity, but these days, like, I know everyone disagrees with me on AI. I don't give a shit. But like, AI is really good for stuff like this. Yeah. So you could you don't have to use Unity because there's a load of tutorials in the community.
Yeah, as an educational tool, it's phenomenal. Like, I was talking to Code Monkey about this actually, and we were saying that I think there's a great piece of like two streams, right? You use video tutorials to help you with things, and then which can give you the generic overviews, and teach it in a way that is like human understandable, however you want to frame it, right? So like generic tutorial, here's how you do this thing in this way. And then you go, okay, how do I apply that to the specifics of my game? That's where you can go to talk to an LLM about it and get the more detailed response that is more bespoke for the thing that you're working on. And I think in Synergy, that's a really great way to start, like, to learn how to make games nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, God, I'm very envious of I'm not envious of young people because they've been totally screwed in so many ways that I cannot even begin to describe.
That's for another podcast. We can have that one in another, like.
Yeah. But what I am jealous of is this idea that, I mean, first, the internet was amazing. Wikipedia then comes along, and then you get AI. And in terms of learning something, including game development, it's just absolutely fantastic. As long as you don't like completely rely on it and outsource your brain to it, which would be bad. I mean, I think it's worth learning how to code if locked in a room with access to nothing, you know. But it's so much easier than it. I mean, when I first coded, right, there was no debugger. I mean, this sounds ludicrous, right? But the early days of DirectX, if your game crashed and you couldn't afford 2 monitors, because no video card supported 2 monitors anyway, right? So when my first game, Asteroid Miner, would crash, the debugging steps were, it crashed, and I think I was going left. And then you have to reboot the PC, because this is before Windows got preemptive, whatever. You'd have to reboot your PC and then look at the code and work out what you think might have happened.
Oh, God.
So now, obviously, you hit a breakpoint and it's kind of like, oh, this has gone wrong. I can see that. It's
like, it would be really hard to even do like a binary search in that instance for like.
Well, you can do it, but it takes weeks.
Yeah, I don't have any desire to live in that world. So I'm grateful that because I mean, look, my path, and we spoke about this broadly. Like, my path was ActionScript, right? Flash, making Flash movies, turning into Flash, learning ActionScript to be like, here's how I make a play button work, you know, and then learning ActionScript that way, and then hard coding in a, you know, IDE only ActionScript engine framework, right? So I had no editor tools. And so then moving from that into Unity, having access to a visual editor for a lot of things opens up a lot of potential, right?
It does.
And because, especially when it comes to like UI, for instance, and this is something I'd maybe like to talk to you about, because you don't have a visual editor, is that right? You are all entirely code.
I sometimes do like tools for stuff, like, you know, but it's bespoke. It's like, for this game, I've got a particle editor and a ship editor and a hull editor, but like they're bodged into the game,
right?
You know,
whereas like, okay, so with Unity, you get, you know, all of the visual editing tools and the way that scripts can, and it's, you know, it's a workflow thing, right? That is very familiar to somebody who came from a Flash, especially the Flash editor kind of background.
Yeah.
So for me, it clicked really well, right? But also having that freedom to visually draw in UI, you know, move components in the scene, especially in 3D space, like that's kind of a must, right? And so talking about making your own engines, and I think that's why the 2D, 3D thing is also really important, because 2D is much easier than 3D. And I can't imagine trying to make 3D games without some kind of visual editor to do that, you know?
Oh man, they did it.
I know.
They did it.
I know they did it. But also, like, how much uphill struggle do you need, right?
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Because it's self-inflicted at that point.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I make 2D games mostly because I'm not interested in 3D math, and I don't like the 3D concepts that become all math. And I learned this at university, that kind of like, I did economics at university, and you could have the most complicated concept with like 2D graphs to do with macroeconomics, but the minute it was a 3D, and then it would be 4D, and then it was pure maths, and I'd be like, oh no, I'm not interested in this. Yeah, like if the only kind of game I could possibly imagine myself making was 3D, I would be using Unity, but now I'd be using, you know, an open source thing.
Yeah. That's interesting. Okay, that's good to see where you sort of sit on that. I think people listening will be interested in that, and I think it's important because I sit there loosely in the same place of I am interested in making my own engine for all of the reasons you've given, but at the same time, I like the flexibility that Unity gives me, or Godot, or something like that, and I think people need to figure out, to your point, actually, in trying lots of different things, figuring out, like, try and make a game in Unity or in Unreal or in Godot, or try and make one using a framework or something similar to start building your own engine out of, and finding that place that works for you, right? Because I think that's a really important notion. And for you, obviously, given your history and your background, it makes total sense that you want that, like, control.
Yeah, I mean, like, everyone's prejudiced and biased about everything, right? And I definitely am, because I'm 56, right? And my first introduction to computers was when you turned it on and it said copyright 1980 Sinclair Research. That was it. That was the operating system. That text, that was it. That's it.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm biased towards like, no, you could just code everything from scratch with using your bare hands. But it doesn't necessarily make any sense to do that anymore. I do find it very rewarding, and I actually, this is a bit of a, obviously he's autistic thing, but like I find it very calming. Mm-hmm. People I find very confusing, but like I tried to get my game to be deterministic recently. It's the first time I've ever done it. To be 100% deterministic. So everything that happens, every frame, every second for every battle, and it will always be deterministic. This is the sort of thing that a lot of coders that have never done it think it's easy until you do it, and then you think, oh my God, it's impossible. And it took me, I think, 2 months or something to sort it all out, right? And although it was kind of hellish, it was wonderful. And I loved it. And part of that is because I have my own engine, right? So like if like 10 hours into tracking down why a missile is 1 pixel off after 4.5 minutes, right? If at that point I'm like, this could be a Unity screw up, that would drive me insane.
Yeah, the black box moment is never fun. Yeah, no, I've been there. You get really deep into something. And this happened on Gen XL multiple times, and it was infuriating. And you just hit that. You're like, okay, we have to work around this somehow. Now, look, I mean, I would argue that there is, and I think this is an important note. And I'm not saying it's counter to what you're saying, but a thing that I do like to bring up to people that are interested in this stuff is that, like, I think games are best, like anything creative is best served within constraints. Right. And so like the actual workaround of having to deal with that is like, okay, well, we can't do this thing. That being like, unfortunately, a constraint that we haven't set ourselves, but like an actual constraint, you end up with more interesting solutions to problems. But sometimes also you end up stopping bloat from happening too. Right.
Well, sometimes it's genuinely like amazingly creative. I gave a talk to my local village where, to picture the village, I am one of the youngest people here. I gave a talk in the village hall about how video games are made, right? And which was fun. But one of the things I talked about is all this. It's saying games cheat.
Yeah,
game technology cheats all the time. The classic thing
smoke
is
and mirrors, like,
right? Yeah, there's a tree behind you, so we're not rendering it because you can't see it, right? Obviously. So it's kind of like the only world that exists is like cast from the rays of your eyes. And this is not intuitive to people. But one of my examples is the obsession in video game character design of like shoulder pads and knee pads. And it's kind of like the elven warriors have big knee pads. And it's like, if you go back to watching like the original like animated 2D Lord of the Rings movie and all that, no, this was not a thing. Mm-hmm. This is a thing because back then, before you had GPUs, skinning arms and elbows was computationally expensive. So if you give characters big chunky shoulder pads, no one will know that the arms aren't connected to the body. Right?
That's interesting. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Now, obviously now we can do it. It doesn't matter. Perfect skinning, but it's but there's all this lore of kind of like, doesn't it look cool when you've got like big spiky shoulder pads and knee pads and stuff like that? And it's like, well, it does kind of look cool, but it was there purely to avoid doing too much real-time skinning of joints. Is it called skinning?
Yeah, it's skinning. Yeah.
Because before you could do it on a shader. We had all this at Elixir. It was a real nightmare. But like Rayman, you remember the Ubisoft? Like, well, it's a really interesting character design because he's got hands but no arms, and it's like, yeah, of course, because then you'd have two joints.
Yeah. So
just don't have arms. And
the train is a hat, the classic Fallout thing, right?
but this is exactly your point, right? In that, like, constraint leads to sometimes really good choices.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of classic art, literature, plays, whatever, when there's only one character because it's a one-man show because we haven't got the budget, and like the whole setting of a play is built around we can only have so many sets. I think constraints are really good, and Elite was the ultimate example to show that if your imagination is good, you can do an open world, galaxy spanning trading, shooting, space 3D combat sim in 16 kilobytes. I mean, that's genius by any standard.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move into talking about your games a little bit, because I think that can lead in quite nicely. Because you are somebody who, unlike most developers, make sequels to their games.
Yes.
Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
It's free money. It depends on the audience, right? There are multiple reasons for this. There are at least three reasons, right? The crude reason is money. Okay, especially now, not so much back in the past, but like if you make a game and it becomes a hit over time. With Steam, what that means is most people bought your game when it was 75% off, right? If you then release a sequel, there's no ambiguity there. They know they like the game. They're not waiting for sale because they loved it. I'll buy the second one. So you literally get 3 times as much money, right? Also, it's way easier to make because you've still got the engine. If you're not me, it's going to be easier. Secondly, like a lot of the design problems have been solved.
Yeah, you've solved the design. I was going to bring that up. Yeah, I think about that all the time.
And like thirdly, like there's an audience for this, and that audience knows what to look for because you've created this thing. So from a kind of like financial point of view, it's not always the case. Like Democracy made me pretty good money. Then Democracy 2 made me loads more money. And then Democracy 3, I was like, this is ridiculous. Democracy 4 made slightly less, but it's a lot later. Mm-hmm. And, still going. And so there's a financial reason to do it. But there's a creative reason to do it in that nobody is happy with what they shipped.
Oh, that hurts. I feel that one. You're right. Yeah, 100%.
They never have been. They never have been. Like
games are abandoned, right? Like never actually.
Yeah, they never
finish.
Don't ship.
They never finish. They're just abandoned. Yeah.
It's like, oh my god, yeah. I remember seeing an email that I was not supposed to see from a publisher, and I'm not going to name any names. Basically, saying, and this was a big thing. It wasn't me. Saying, we're sick of this shit. We're just going to take the last build that was sent and we're going to print that onto the discs.
Whoa. Okay.
It didn't happen. It was part of an aggressive negotiation.
Right.
And it wasn't me. But games. Yeah, your first version kind of sucks. It always does. And you're never happy because you run out of time, you run out of budget, you screwed up and you think we got to ship it anyway. You hire a voiceover artist and you sort of halfway through it, you sort of think, that's shit, but like I paid for her, God. And from a coding point of view, you think, oh my God, all of the bugs and all of the performance issues are due to this decision I made at the start. I wouldn't do it like that again.
So you get like a second shot, essentially, is what you're saying, right? Like,
yeah,
right. And would you say maybe even for games that haven't quite sold a ton, sometimes it's worth doing that second shot because you've got that initial setup that you're talking about?
I have never done that, but I can imagine you've got to kind of like be honest, I think, and look at it. And if you sort of think we got so much right, but boy, did we screw up this bit. If we did it again and fixed that, oh my God. Or it could be like a market fit. So we were talking earlier about the movies. Movies didn't crash and burn, but it wasn't a hit, right? But it had an online sharing your movie, as you remember.
So
and
good.
It came out before YouTube. It was before YouTube, right? In a post-YouTube world, especially if you do integration,
insane.
That would have been great.
Yeah. I think about that all the time. I'm like, it was machinima before machinima was really a thing.
Yeah. So it could be that, like, you know, you just do it again, and now the time is right, sort of thing.
Oh, that's interesting. So almost you've released a game 2 years before an audience is ready for it. So if you make a sequel, suddenly tech or audience or whatever, the addressable market has opened up because the trends have changed in a way that's interesting.
Yeah,
I hadn't ever thought about sequels in that way, but that's actually a really an interesting.
And it can be kind of like random stuff, like a guy who lives near me, who I chat to now and then. He did a game about. I'm not going to say who it is, but you can work out who it is. He did a game about like viruses and diseases. And then COVID happened later. Obviously, tons of interest later. You know, you can just be too early, or you can just be something happens that makes people interested. I mean, there are a lot of reasons to do it, and I think there are very few reasons to not do it. Indie game developers don't do sequels generally because they have this kind of thing in their head that it's kind of a bit naff, a bit kind of like corporate or cash in, but it doesn't have to be. Like my politics game, Democracy, is very popular. It's my best-selling game by far, a series by far. But if you look at screenshots of the first one, it looks really bad.
Yeah.
And like the second one looks a lot better because I got actual artists.
Right.
The third one, I spent more money and had more art, and it looks a lot better. And the fourth one, I think, looks the best.
You don't have the first one on Steam, is that right?
No, it was pre-Steam.
Would you not put it on Steam? Could you not do like a?
I just can't be bothered.
But
can't be bothered.
Put it on Steam. What like do a Democracy 1 like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've lost the source code.
Right, you know where it is. Yeah, that's a good point.
I probably have a build of it, but does it even run on Windows?
Yeah, that's true. But I think there would be an audience that would pick that up just as like Democracy Origins, you know?
I did put Kudos 2 on there.
Kudos is I want you to make a Kudos 3. We spoke about this when Cliff and I first sort of got chatting. I spoke to him about how I religiously played The Sims Social, and that was the Sims Social version that EA that lived very briefly for a period of time before they made a different thing that they then called The Sims Social. But I was learning, yes, that The Sims Social was essentially Kudos, and I learned that you were behind that. So
yeah, that was the game. That was what I said earlier. That was this little bit of contract work that I did to Maxis. Basically, someone working very high up at Maxis emailed me out of the blue and said, I think there was a concern that everyone working on The Sims had been working on The Sims for so long that they were kind of a bit burned out, and just that they had this idea of what The Sims is,
right,
and that's what was going to go on forever, right? And he had this idea. It wasn't just me, although I never saw any of the others, that he went to a bunch of indie devs and said, if I gave you whatever it was, $20,000 or more than that, I can't remember, and pretended that you had the Sims IP, make us a game and pitch it in like a phone call and then make it, and that was my idea. So it became that, but like originally it was like an ancestral thing. So the idea was, it was like this: you would go through ancestors, and you'd be a peasant or whatever.
Right.
And over time, you try and like your family line would do better because of the choices you made and stuff like that. And that eventually became like this, what they then put online as the Sims social. And I was free to do what I wanted with the idea afterwards, which is very good of them. But actually, Kudos was based on Donnie Darko.
Okay.
Like, all of my game ideas are bullshit, right? So, because originally Kudos was a game about mental health, and this is before I realised I was well placed to do this.
Okay.
But it was a game where you have like all your attributes, like any RPG, but they would be, you know, like anxiety, anger, blah. So you were kind of like balanced. It was basically a simulation game of balancing neurotransmitters in your own head.
Like, instead of needs, you had the emotions, essentially.
Like forces, yeah. Which these days would probably be very popular.
Kudos, there you go. Kudos 3, let's go.
Yeah, get the anxiety DLC. You know. Get the ADHD expansion. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, the sort of memes write themselves. But actually, I mean, like, you know, you like to talk about game design, and this is a thing that that I feel very strongly about. That I think the best game designs have nothing to do with game. I've never been inspired by a game to make a game. I am a game player, and I love games, and I make games. Mm-hmm. That's my media. Well, medium. But the ideas are from something else. So like Kudos, it was watching Donnie Darko, which is a film I think is brilliant, but I have never watched it again. This is too intense for me on that sort of topic. But when I watched that, I thought, oh my God, there is a game in this.
It spoke to you in that way.
Yeah. And like Gratuitous Space Battles was inspired by... We should talk about that, because I invented an entire genre.
Yeah, no, we will. Let's, for sure.
But that was inspired by reading a book about D-Day. And the conceit of the book was that it nearly went wrong. And it went right because the Allies said, here's our plan. Here's all our boats and planes. And this is the plan. Good luck. And on the day, everything went wrong, but we worked around it.
Right.
But the German plan was Hitler is supreme commander, blah, blah, blah. And they had the Tiger tanks and the Tiger II tanks, King Tiger tanks, in reserve, because only Hitler will decide when they are to be employed. And he was asleep. And no one's going to go and shake the Fuhrer awake, right? Who's going to do that? Eventually they do, but it's too late. There's a bridgehead, and, you know, fascism is defeated. And so I was inspired by this idea that actually the real genius of generals is setting things up so you will win, because no plan survives contact with the enemy, which is a well-known saying, but no one had made a game out of it.
Interesting. Okay.
So that was the inspiration for that. And Democracy is inspired by a book about building an artificial robotic chimpanzee.
Okay.
Because they a long time ago, you may remember, I don't know, because you're so amazingly young, but there was a game called Creatures.
Yep. I know Creatures. I'm not that young. I'm not that young anymore. Unfortunately, you know, we have a new era of game developers now. I'm not that young anymore. So, you know, I'm getting into my mid-30s. So,
so young. But so that was a game, very old game now.
Yeah.
That was basically using like genetic algorithms and stuff. But it was made by a guy who was really into AI. And he had theories as to how to create. This is a long time before anything else, and his big theory was that you cannot have disembodied AI, because what makes us intelligent is our interaction with the physical world.
So, what do you mean by disembodied AI?
So, an LLM.
Okay.
Right. So you could argue he's been totally proven wrong. Okay. But of course, back then, like, computers were nothing. compared to what we have now, right? So his thing was that you can't just simulate a load of neurons and hope for the best. What you need is interesting inputs to those neurons and a feedback mechanism, a kind of reinforcement learning, but in the physical world. So he decided the way to do that was to build only the torso of a robotic chimpanzee called Lucy. And there was a great TV documentary about it. He was kind of mad, but brilliant. And so he wrote a book about it. Here's how I built my robotic chimpanzee and what I learned. And in that book, he describes neural networks. And it was the first time I'd ever heard the phrase or seen it. There was no software you could buy. So when I read that book, weirdly in my brain, I thought, well, that's just like the way politics and economics interfaces. I reckon I could simulate an economy like that.
Okay, so you took the neural network aspect of that book and then turned it into the political simulator that is now known as democracy.
Yeah, and you could say that that guy had worked on a video game, but that's just adjacent, right? So the inspiration for democracy is basically growing up in a crazily political household. We used to go on day trips to like trade union conferences as a child.
Yeah.
It was that.
It was kind of almost inevitable that you were going to make a game about politics.
I guess so. And I did economics at the London School of Economics, right? So it was a combination of like childhood plus degree plus reading a book about chimpanzees or robots. And that, I think, this is what I'm trying to get at. I'm rambling, but what I'm trying to get at is that that's how you get good ideas.
Yeah.
Because it's from outside. Like I used to publish games. I published like 4 games or something by other indies. So I used to get a lot of pitches, and the pitches I would hate would be, it's like this game, but with this game.
Yep.
And I think, well, any idiot can just pick 2 popular games and go, it's like these. And see, I'm going to sound like a right-wing maniac, which I'm definitely not, right? But I've read a book by Peter Thiel. This is going back before the crazy.
You just immediately set off some alarms for everybody watching.
Yeah.
Go on.
Oh my God!
Let's see where this goes.
Don't get any more of these fascists, son. No, he wrote a book, like a business book, nothing to do with any of the Antichrist nonsense. He wrote a business book a long time ago. I think it's called 0 to 1. I'm not sure. But anyway, he has this idea in this book, which sounds really evil, but it's actually quite practical. And he was basically saying competition destroys profits. So if you have no competition, you make tons of money. Right. The minute you've got any competition, you both compete down to nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and you can read that in an evil fascist way of kind of like, I will put everyone out of business, right?
Yeah, your take on that depends on your morality, I think. But subjectively, you go, that makes sense because monopoly exists and race to the bottom exists. It's like these two things exist in our current climate, right?
But from a creative point of view, he's absolutely right, and it's quite inspiring, really, because
okay, so like why compare yourself to other games? Because you're actually automatically putting yourself at a disservice, potentially.
Well, I not so much that, although I think that's true. That is true. What I mean more fundamentally than that, right? So, I mean, if I was drunk and being brutal, and someone came up to me at a games show saying, "Please publish my game," thankfully, no one knows who I am anymore. I'm too old. But if someone came up and said, "Oh, please publish my game," and I say, "What is it?" If they said it's like a roguelike deck builder, right? The thing is, I'm so old, right? I don't even know what a roguelike is. Something, I don't know, dungeons. It doesn't matter, right? And I've even published a deck builder, I guess, a Shadowhand, a long time before it was a thing. But the idea that anyone who'd done any reading about business and marketing and positioning or listened to old people like me talk about it, the idea that anyone would say, you know what the world needs is a roguelike deck builder. And I just think you'd have to be on drugs to think this, because immediately you're competing with everyone, right?
Okay.
Whereas if, like, imagine before my game Democracy came out, right? I'm kind of going up to the world of games and I'm saying, what the world needs is a icon-based, spreadsheety type strategy game about interest rates, right? Now, it sounds like no one will buy that.
So, like, how do you sell that, right? Like, that's the argument that comes back to this, is how do you market a game that nobody knows about, right? That's the counter to this.
I've done it 3 times. Okay, so Kudos was like an early version because The Sims was out. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So, it's like The Sims, but no, there's no 3D world, and no, there's no animation. It's a game about decisions between your 20th and 30th birthday. It was a little bit oblique. Democracy is a very hard sell, but if you show someone a screenshot of the main Democracy user interface, if they've ever seen it or played it or watched a stream, they're not going to go, that's one of those games that's like, no, it's my game. It's my game. No other game looks like that. No other game has that sort of interface. Even though it's sold millions of copies over 4 versions, there isn't a copy of it. There's not a clone of it. It doesn't exist. That's my thing. So I did that, and then I had the whole auto battler thing. That was funny. That was hard. And I did not leverage it because I'm not a billionaire now. Right? But
yeah, so I guess let's talk about that. So Space Battles then probably is a game that you brought out. What was that? 2009. Okay. So look, I mean, this is difficult, right? Because aside from maybe Production Line, which is your most recent original IP that comes off of a genre that I think is quite popular on Steam. So it's even hard to say this, but what I guess what I'm getting at is I think you are in a position where you have enough knowledge of your original IP in a market that is really competitive right now, where you can build out a new thing and people can go, "Ooh, okay, cool." Production Line, whereas, is the one that's like new in the modern Steam era where there's just so many things on Steam. I mean, even in 2019, there was less games than there are now on Steam. So I'd be interested in how you would do that and how you would make a game work with an IP that nobody really knows that genre yet, right? Like, basically what I'm saying is, if you had to sell Gratuitous Space Battles now with that genre not existing yet, in the current climate, do you think you'd be able to do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to appear like an arrogant dick. It's incredibly hard. I tell you what helped, and this is 2 things. Because on the face of it, I am a very introverted coder who doesn't like being with a lot of people, doesn't like meeting new people, and finds a lot of like marketing-y type stuff really hard, because like it's all people and relationships, and like, you know, I used to go to GDC every year to like network, and I hated it, and I would spend a lot of that time like lying face down on a bed in a hotel going, why am I here? You know, I hate it, right? The 2 things that helped is I used to be inexplicably the lead guitarist in heavy metal bands, and that's just a world of arrogant attention seeking. Otherwise you're invisible. You know, you cannot go out on stage and sort of go, I think you'll find that this is a particular clever use of this scale, and you will all appreciate that, and I will become famous. No, it's all who's the loudest, most over the top, most showy, most memorable, most whatever, right? So I kind of learned a bit of that, and then worked Demis and Peter and saw how they do this stuff. And the thing is, like, what you're saying is, if I had a completely revolutionary idea for a new game genre and that no one knew how to play, how would I sell it today? And I would do it the same way. I would I would do it in a kind of demanding people pay attention to me kind of way. And I think it's actually a lot more technical than it sounds. And almost one of the benefits of being autistic is you end up being a lot more analytical about presentation and people. Now, I'm kind of retired now. I don't give a shit. So I've paid no attention to what's behind me or what I'm wearing or anything, right? But back in the day, I always remember this thing that is like I think I was saying to you earlier, most interviews are boring. Most of what most people say is boring, right? And like there will be quite a few people watching this if they get this far. I'm sure they will.
Hopefully.
Who, if you said to them tomorrow, what was it any good? What did he say? They probably think, well, he loves AI and he admires Peter Thiel. Right? Now, I didn't, but these are not the key takeaways from this interview. But now, I did not say either of those things for this purpose because I'm not selling anything. I'm working on a game, but I don't give two shits if I sell any copies. But back in the day when I was giving interviews and trying to promote my game, I would be quite analytical about thinking, how can I describe this game in a way that's not... like
a little bit provocative.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
It wouldn't be like, trust me, bro, it'll be fun.
Right.
So like if I was doing the what I was saying earlier about D-Day, if someone sort of says, what inspired you to make your game about space battles? The way to do that is to sort of say, did you know that if Hitler had woken up earlier on D-Day, we might be living in a fascist state?
Yeah. No, I'm thinking...
What?
You've got the takeaway from the interview. That's really smart. Yeah. No, yeah. Especially in the modern era as well of how. Yeah.
Yeah. Because everything ends up at TikTok. but Molyneux knew that. He knew how to do that. And the thing is, more to the more like helpful point about game design and game business and everything. It is my belief, for me, it might not be true of everyone, but what I'm saying is I'm not naturally designed to be a marketing guy, right? It is my opinion, and I think it's even more true now than it was when I did it, that it is easier to come up with something totally new and unusual and have to explain to people why it'll be good than it is to make something a bit more generic and have anyone give a shit. Because like anyone who's finished a game and is now trying to market it, or they're trying to collect wish lists, right? You've worked for 2 years and it's really hard, and now you've got 7 wish lists and you're like, this is impossible, right? Anyone in that space will know that like all of the technical challenges of making the game, especially if you're releasing it on Steam or mobile, right? All of the technical challenges were very, very hard. But getting anyone to care about your game is way harder.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing to do. Getting people to care.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you're coming into it with a kind of like, yeah, I've made a game and it's about interest rates, or okay, or I've made a game, it's a space battle game, you've got no control over what happens, right? Which was my thing.
Yeah.
Is it auto battle?
Yeah. Which
right?
Yeah.
Which I should have run with a bit more, perhaps. I'm coming back to it. Anyway, I don't really care. But yeah, the minute what I'm getting at is like trying to sell something that's almost impossible to sell. You would think it would be very hard, but it gives you. Okay, here's my thing. Here's my takeaway. AI, Peter Thiel, and this. Right. The key to marketing, I think, and I think it's more true now than back then, is that your game has to be remarkable. And everyone uses that word, but they use it wrong.
Right.
Remarkable is not good. Remarkable is not popular. And like I say, in this interview, right, what are the remarkable things? He loves AI and he read a book by Peter Thiel. They're remarkable because you feel compelled to remark upon it, either to sort of go, at last, another game dev who uses AI, or like, oh, Peter Thiel, I love him or hate him. It doesn't matter. It's remarkable, and your game has to be remarkable. If you've done a two-dimensional version of The Sims that's turn-based, that's remarkable. Even if the remark is, well, that won't work. Okay. I've done a roguelike deck builder in Unity. That's not remarkable.
Right.
Even at the end of the sentence, people have forgotten what you said because it was just zero information.
To some degree, that's, I guess, then in putting that into maybe more concrete ways to think about it, is like having a hook that in of itself is something that people are, like, is going to pique people's interest potentially. Whether that, because I don't want to take away from this to be like be polarizing intentionally and just like, like drum up, because I think that can be misconstrued potentially from what you're saying. So if I understand correctly, it's really just like make sure that the hook, or that there's one thing specific about your game that is noteworthy that does pique people's interest.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't try and sort of calculate. It's no good coming up with a generic idea for a game and then thinking we need to make it remarkable. Let's stick a racist dwarf in it or something. Like that's not going to work. I think more like loads of people have loads of ideas for games, and I think people are too quick to like reject an idea and go, yeah, I mean, it could be good, but like, how do you even explain that? And the thing is, like, if your game, it sounds counterintuitive, but if your game does require quite a bit of explanation because it's slightly weird, as long as you can make the explanation interesting, like I could explain the theoretical basis behind which an auto battler is fun, or I can talk about Hitler's sleep patterns, right? One of which is memorable, one of which is possibly interesting if you're writing a book on game design, maybe. But I don't know. You need a lot of experience of trying. It's
hard to quantify. Yeah, I can understand that. Well, hopefully people listening can kind of understand the perspective. It's thoughtful and it's made me think a little bit about that, and it's interesting to hear your take on it.
Well, like a similar thing on that basis is to do with passion and interest. And I think something that, especially when you're younger, you don't really appreciate is that you're not very interesting. Especially now, like most young people, you have followers on social media and everything. It's not that you're it's not just that you're not interesting, but you're not a rare snowflake. I'm so unique, right? You're really not. And especially because you can sell now to everyone in the world.
But everyone can sell to everyone in the world. That's kind of the thing, right?
Yeah, they can. But what people do is they think, what will people buy, right? And I think I've done well from thinking, what do I think is awesome? And how many people out of 7 billion will agree? And the numbers are so big that you sort of think, oh, if 99.9% of the world think that my idea for a game is shit, it doesn't matter because I don't need them. I only need that 10 to 1%. That's still a stupid amount of sales, okay? And the thing is, the more generic you make your product, the more useless it is. And like, I can imagine like a version of me thinking, oh, wow, it'd be so cool if you had a game. And what it was basically a visualization of the interrelationships between different economic decisions, right? But that won't sell, so I'll make a roguelike deck builder,
right?
Okay. It turns out you can sell millions of copies of a game like that as long as you package it nicely and you design it well and you do your stuff. And the thing is, I think a lot of game devs, sometimes, if you talk to them a lot, you realize that they're interested in some obscure thing, but they don't make a game about it. Mm-hmm. And unless it's really really the economics of creating like microphone stands or something. If that's your special interest, then you're probably fucked, right? But if it's something not quite that ridiculous, then I don't think you should discount it, because I do think that gamers and the general public can smell people being fake.
Okay, so be authentic and make games that you care about and want to play.
Yeah, so like from what I know of you, I don't know you massively well, but you should totally be making games about like TV and,
I know.
and films.
Yeah, I know. I am. It is always in the back of my brain. You know, like some kind of successor to the movies has always been something I wanted to do. It's just trying to figure out the scale. And we spoke about this, I think, ages ago. But it's just been like, what does that look like in a way that is, to our earlier point, achievable? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
My interests have changed a little bit now, and I think I'm more interested in. I want to do a sequel to RPG Tycoon at some point. Just to go back and like do it right now, because it's been 10. Actually, when it's 2026, so this year it's been 10 years since I released that game, right? And like, I'm a much better designer, I'm a much better programmer, so I want another shot at it. But that's not going to be the thing I do next. I'm not going to talk about the thing I'm going to do next, but like, it is definitely still in my wheelhouse of strategy management kind of games, because I love to play them, but I also always think about those kind of games to design, right? So to your point, like,
exactly.
there's very niche things that I'm like, I can make a strategy management tycoon-y kind of game out of this. And that's what I want to do. And I mean, to some degree, Cabs was also that for me. Like, Cabs of Chaos was, I loved playing the multiplayer in Simpsons Hit and Run, Simpsons Road Rage with my sister, right? The 2-player version of that. I was like, well, what is, like, that then just sparked what if I kind of create something like that in the form of a split screen local co-op, especially in this friend slop era where there's now a climate on Steam for multiplayer games. It's just like, okay, well, people love Crazy Taxi. They Hit and Run had its whole. Hit and Run was obviously the sequel, but Road Rage there's just so much love there for that kind of cartoony chaos, and so that was kind of the inspiration for me for Cabs. And it was also something that while I was working on Gen Exile, I could work on and tinker, because it's very modular and piecemeal. And I've spoken about this on the podcast a couple of times already, but like, for me, it was very much, that is a game that scales really well. So I could stop making it tomorrow if I wanted and ship it. And so now it's just a case about like just getting good enough content that it is rounded enough that I'm like, okay, I take it from maybe like a 4 out of 10 to maybe, a 6 or 7 or 8 out of 10, and just try to figure out what that looks like. And I'm thinking about games in that way. And I'm thinking about, after that, the next sort of things I want to do is, very much like, what is something that I just kind of want to make and play, and to try and do that in an economical way, right? So like the tech that I've built for Cabs, the art style and all of the rendering tech that I've built, I'm going to do that in my next game. It's going to look slightly different, but a lot of the skills that I've learned in making assets really quickly in Blender and some of the shortcuts I've made with the art style, I want to do that moving forward, right? Because I'm very quick at that, and I can make art very quickly on my own. And I may hire it depends how well Cabs does. If Cabs makes me a bunch of money, then yeah, of course I'll hire an artist, because that'll save me a ton of time. But I'm thinking in that economical scale, Yeah.
But I mean, the really important thing is that, like, when you talk about, what you're making, that you're really into that thing. I think there was an era where a lot of indie devs would be like, here's my analysis of the top 10 on Steam, and therefore I think that this genre works well.
It's still happening. That's still where we're at. That's still a lot of the advice on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of think that is misplaced, personally, because I think, well, it depends, right? I advertise.
Look, I mean, yeah, I agree and disagree in the case of like, there's this concept that I've been sort of using that Luke Muscat, Design Fruit Ninja spoke about, which is like shots on goal, right? And you've got to be shooting towards the goal.
I disagree.
You've got to be shooting towards the goal, right? And not away from the goal. So there's a little bit of like, you need to understand which direction.
Well, I agree. You should aim at roughly at the goal, right? But I think you shouldn't have in your mind I've got lots of shots on goal,
Yeah.
right? Because what that then becomes is kind of, I used to get a load of pitches, right? If someone would pitch me a game, and I'd sort of go, and they'd sort of go, I've got this other idea, and I'd sort of be, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, that's it. Right.
Because all I want is the thing you really want to make, right? I don't want you to go through your list of things you think I might fund, right? And forget publishing, because it's not really my area anymore. But I think you should burn your boat. I mean, don't. But like, I think you should have your thing that I'm going to make this game. I think the game you should be making is the game that, like, if you knew you could only ever make one and then you die, like, make that game because you'll be really into that game. And the thing is, I think when you do that, marketing's really easy. So back in the day, I used to do a lot of interviews on podcasts and YouTube things and whatever, and pre-YouTube, a lot of stuff. And I never prepared for any of it because I never had to, because, you know, I could talk for when I was making Production Line.
Yeah, I remember.
It wasn't like I saw a gap in the market for like a car-based Factorio type game. It wasn't that. Like, I'd read loads of books, bizarrely, about Henry Ford, and I'd read those books, including books by Henry Ford, and I'd read those books because I'd read books about the car company Tesla, and I was fascinated in how cars get made and the scale and the complexity, and then I was fascinated with the history and how that happened, and then I went to Detroit and had a tour of the Ford factory in Detroit, and we went to the Henry Ford Museum. So what I'm getting at, it was really genuine, right? So if you're a journalist in wherever and you're interviewing me, at no point are you possibly going to think this is a cynical attempt to make a game that he thinks will sell.
Right.
It's like, no, last week when I was at the Henry Ford factory, they had this little widget and that's in the game. And like, and I think that makes the marketing of your game very easy. And anyone who's worked at a big studio who has ever been interviewed as like one of the coders will know that, oh my God, it's painful as hell if like people are like, oh, this is Cliff and he's working on this bit of the game, it's really cool. And you can sort of think, well, I hate this and I think this is a shit feature and I don't think it should have gone in, you know. So like, you know, what you want to be is you want to be the big ideas person. Because then, like, I can't remember how many I did. Production Line, I think I did 153 YouTube videos or something about the making of it. It was at least 100, it was 100 to 150, whatever. I can't remember, right? And the thing is, and the same with Democracy 4, and I never ran out of things to say, and none of it was scripted because I was so... Like, I did a whole video about the Overton window and its representation in the UI, right? And I could do that at the drop of a hat right now because I'm genuinely interested. I'm genuinely happy to discuss that and have I implemented it the right way and what is it and how does that work and how does that apply over time in British politics. It's my thing. I can talk about it, right? And I think that's what indie dev should do. And that is why I think having interests outside of games and having experience of stuff outside of games it's very good because you don't then just sound like a sort of pundit talking about the games industry.
You can pull other inspirations in and have lots of reference points to be passionate about the thing that you're making and show love for the thing that you're making.
Yeah, I think if your whole childhood is nothing but video games and your whole life is nothing but video games and all of your friends do nothing but play video games, I don't think you'll make the best video game. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe there's some fake. Maybe Notch is that. I have no idea. But I think it makes you more creative to... Yeah,
it's not going to hurt, right? Like, it's not going to make things worse pulling in other things from outside of games.
Yeah, absolutely. I might think that just because, you know, I'm older and I've done a lot of crazy stuff. I've had various weird careers and stuff as well. But I mean, like, don't be afraid to sort of be influenced by stuff that's nothing to do with games. I mean, George Lucas is one of his big influences in the visual design of Star Wars is hot rod cars from the 60s and early 70s. Because he used to, if you've ever seen the film American Graffiti, it's very obscure, but it was his first successful film. And it was basically Happy Days. Before Happy Days. So Happy Days is based on American Graffiti. In fact, it's got one of the, Richard Cunningham in Happy Days was one of the actors discovered in American Graffiti. Doesn't matter. The point is, well, there's 2 points. Firstly, that was a hugely successful film in 1974 or whatever. And it was because George Lucas made a film about what he was obsessed with, which was like cruising around in cool cars at night. The whole film is set at night in California. And that was his lifestyle when he was young. He was obsessed with cars. Then he was in an accident and couldn't be obsessed with cars. But the point is, if you look at Star Wars does not look like Buck Rogers in the whatever century, right? And if you look at the design of the ships, and it's really obvious if you look at the Phantom Menace many years later, they're all like 60s style hot rod cars with fins and stuff. And in some cases with like exposed bits of engine, because that's where they've taken a panel off and put in a bigger whatever, because that was his obsession. He studied anthropology at university, and he was obsessed with hot rod cars. And what you end up with is Ewoks and Wookiees and X-Wing fighters, right? But that's not, even though he was a real movie nerd, he did draw from that Akira Kurosawa and all that kind of stuff. He's drawn a load of non-movie stuff into movies, and that's how you get creativity. So like my pro tip to indie devs is do something nothing to do with games, take
have a hobby, essentially.
Have hobbies.
Right.
Yeah. Learn a musical instrument, learn a language, learn to do some...
So basically just become a rounded person, is that what you're saying?
I hate that term because it seems really loaded that someone's decided what makes you a rounded person. Okay, I don't like that, but enough. But I did go through a phase of stuff like this. I learned archery, and I tried horse riding. Hated it. I've driven lots of silly things, tanks and self-propelled guns, flown various things, and like out of every 10 stupid things that you try that you're interested in, you come across some obscure thing that you then get attached to. I think
right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was quite into archery.
So then I guess not using the loaded term of well-rounded. Then just like find other things to expand your horizons.
Yeah, I think so. I think there is an assumption that you'll be a better game designer if you play a lot of games. Now, I'm slightly lucky because I'm so old. Because like my first game console was Pong. It was actually a console. It's just Pong, and that was it. So I played a lot of games in my childhood, right? But I don't play that many different games now. And whenever I do an interview like this, people always mention a game that I've never heard of and I haven't played. They sort of go, "Yeah, it's just like this, right, Cliff?" And I'm kind of like, "Okay, never heard of it," but But fine. I mean, I still do play new games, but not that much. But yeah, I think take influence from outside of games. That's where things get interesting. Like I say, all my success is down to watching Donnie Darko, reading a book about D-Day, and reading a book about chimpanzees. I could have never played a video game, and I would still have the three important influences that gave me ideas that allowed... I've made other games that weren't as creative, and they're never as successful.
Interesting. Okay.
So production line was good. It made me money. Very happy. But it wasn't like a big mega hit.
Would you make a sequel to it though? If we're talking about sequels from before,
no.
Okay, so why not? Because then if we go back to say, if you say, oh, you could do it again and fix some of the stuff from the last one, why wouldn't you make a sequel for that game?
I think I got it out of my system in that one. And I was quite proud of it. And I enjoyed the technical challenge because people built vast factories. And it's like an inverse Factorio in that you ordered stuff to come in on conveyor belts. You know, you need certain stuff, and you place where they come in, and you place down conveyor belts, right? But the conveyor belts will join up. You don't have to think about it. The AI does the route finding that allows every bit to get to its point in the thing. And you sort of think, okay, well, that's slightly different from Factorio, but who cares? But that makes it about 1 million times harder to optimize. It's just chaos. And that was a mistake. I shouldn't have done it like that. But I really enjoyed that game. I guess I got less obsessed with car factories, and I just kind of, I'm happy with that.
Okay, so because you're not that interested in the subject matter anymore, you're not interested in making a sequel to it?
No, but if I'd never made Democracy, right? If I suddenly had some major surgery and I needed millions of pounds, and it was like, oh shit, how do I get money? I'd make more DLC for Democracy 4, and it would certainly be like financially. If I was a studio, like a normal studio, not me. We would have done production line 2, and it would have been better, and it would have made money. But because it's just me, did I want to spend another 2 years on conveyor belts and wheels? Not really. I love doing it.
I guess you also have the pull of, which we can get into, of making a sequel to your Space Battles series, right? So you have the freedom at the moment now that you've got like multiple IP that just you can come back to. And I think that's interesting, right? Like why did you choose to go to Space Battles rather than making a brand new IP again? Because I guess you did Production Line, then you did Democracy 4. So you've gone, instead of doing another IP, you're back to another sequel. So like, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, it's just infuriating, and you kind of don't want to hear it, right? But basically, like Gratuitous Space Battles paid for my house, right? And then the Democracy games did very well. I then decided to take the profits from this and place it on a plucky tech startup called Tesla. When I bought my car, so it's about 10 years ago. And then I changed my mind on that after quite a while, as he started to go crazy. And I then put that money on NVIDIA, which was another exciting small company. So I was very lucky.
You timed the market well from the sounds of it.
Yeah, it's almost like I studied economics. I used to work on stock market trading software in an IT capacity, not as a coder, but a long time ago. So I was always interested in that. So I kind of played my cards very well. The reason I am doing Ridiculous Space Battles is just because I feel like it. It has a Steam store page, and it will be on sale in a few months. The only reason I've got a deadline, I'm loving doing it, mostly because when I originally did Gratuitous Space Battles, 2048 width monitor was like the business, right? Amazing. And now this monitor that I'm sat in front of here is 5120 by 1440, and it's like just about touch the ends, And I've got a GeForce Mega whatever video card that can just do everything. So from a coding point of view, like the challenge of how ridiculous can I make my particle effects at 5120 res with a GeForce RTX something, is just interesting to me. And I think I did a sequel to Gratuitous Space Battles, which flopped badly, and I got annoyed. And then I didn't abandon it. I mean, I shipped it. I didn't do any DLC for it, though.
Yeah, that must have been when we met, because that was 2015. So that's when I would have been on the circuit with RPG Tycoon. Yeah, I remember that.
I mean, that's quite a while ago.
I didn't realize it flopped, but I can. Right.
I mean, it made money, but it didn't make much money, and it had technical issues. Basically, what I was doing was I was hitting like the memory limit for 32-bit app.
Right.
Now I'm better at this, and I don't. I could make it a 64-bit app. I just literally can't be asked. So I'm kind of making it partly because I can't. I tried to retire. Really short. I tried to retire. I was very bored, so I started an energy company and built a power station.
As you do.
Yeah, as you do. And then I sort of thought, okay, I've done that now. And I do love programming. I love really complicated programming. So
I can't see you properly retiring. What I know about you, like you will have something you're interested in, and that will carry you forward until it's done. And something I admire about you is your ability to kind of say, I want to do this thing, committing to do that thing, and then like I hope, from what I can see, being quite good at like making that thing work out.
Yeah, I'm quite driven. I mean, there are so many points in the building of a solar farm where you just want to go, no, it's awful. So I'm kind of, what I'm getting at is like, do not, like if you watch this video and then you sort of think, okay, so why is he doing this? It's not because I am bitter and twisted over the fact that I fucking invented auto battlers and nobody knows. Even though my game was used in a court case in Japan between two mega companies as prior art. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Initially, I was contacted and they said, we can't help noticing that we're being sued saying we copied this thing, but your game, Gratuitous Space Battles, did it before anyone, right? If anything, we copied you, but we, ignore that. And I sort of said, yeah, you're right. Yeah, obviously it's online. You can tell when that game came out. You're right. And they said, we would like to use you in our court case against this mega billion. And I was like, I'm not interested. I don't want to get in a
legal. Yeah.
But they cited me anyway, which didn't matter. I didn't actually have to talk to a lawyer. It didn't matter. It was just but I thought it was interesting that it is so definitely the case that was the first auto battler game, that there was a court case involving it. So I'm not doing this because like I've looked at how big auto battlers have got and thought I can make some cash. I'm not even doing it so I can wang on about.
The world's first auto battler returns as the like tagline.
I've tried it a little bit
for like your next trailer though, but like I do think if you open literally with the world's first auto battler, because that's a claim. Nobody cares. I kind of occasionally mention it to people and they sort of go, I thought it was a World of Warcraft mod. And I'm kind of like, or Warcraft, whatever it was. And I'm like, no, like look at the dates. and the thing is, because I distinctly remember it, right? Because you do an interview and like people would be like, so you don't control the units at all? And I'm like, no, it's awesome. You just have to watch it and then work out what went wrong. And people were very like, and in fact, I entered it for the IGF and only one of the judges played it and they said it was an interesting idea, but it didn't really work. So I sort of think, I think it was more than an interesting idea. I think it's a whole genre now. Right.
Anyway, I am bitter and twisted, obviously, you can tell. But what I'm getting at is I'm doing it because I love that game. It was 15 years ago, whatever. So I'm going back to it and enjoying it again because it's so long ago. And I also love using Claude to like sort of say, what if I coded it like this? And it's very good at optimization and all that.
Yeah.
And because the AI coding thing happened very recently from my point of view. And this is the first game I'm making where there is that option to ask an LLM questions about code. And I'm very interested in the technical side of programming. So I need something to do so I can play with that. And this is it.
Okay, interesting. So this is almost your litmus test for how LLMs can help push the boat forward a little bit.
Yeah. I think they're really amazing. And I should say, just to be controversial, I have some AI art in there. So I use Scenario Or
do you want to jump into the project and we can have a look at it, and you can maybe show off the bits that you're talking about and clarify some of this stuff, because it'll probably be easier if that's something you want to do.
Does that work? That works, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah, it looks great. Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. I mean, like it kind of offends me slightly to just say it's an auto-battler, because that was my. So this. Oh no! That isn't. That is actual paid-for art. These little icons here are AI. Right?
Okay. So so it's just a tiny. So why did you choose to use AI art? Because I'm not a big fan of it, right? Just in terms of, because it's the ethical reasons for using it. So I'm just curious on, like, why did you decide that it was good enough and passed your test, especially if you've paid an artist to do the ship designs?
Yeah, I know. I tell you what, I just let me turn on the sound down, because it's kind of it's a hugely chaotic thing. To be honest, like I was kind of even on the fence as to whether or not I'd even release the game, let alone sell it, let alone promote it, right? Because I was doing it for fun. And something I really
this looks great. It's so chaotic. Just to quickly,
and you can go to kind of like different speed and speed up, and yeah, it's and everything has like individual mines, and escape pods have tooltips and everything. There's a lot of shit going on in this game. I don't like dealing with people. I'm not a team player. And the idea that I could, for fun, just make a game where all I had to do was pay money to like buy some stock spaceships, and then I could mess around with them in Blender or whatever. Mm-hmm. So when it came to like, oh, I've gone off my own screen. So these things down here, these little icons are like AI. But actually, it's funny because a lot of them are AI that's actually trained on the art from the game.
You've trained it on the real art. Yeah, which, like, I mean, that's another weird ethical thing, right? Because it's like, well, if you just have this model that can generate stuff within the space, we're in such a morally gray area about a lot of this, and I'm not a huge fan of using it. Partly also just because I like the process of making art too.
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing, right? Like, this is where we kind of have opposite. It's a very stupidly stats heavy game. We have kind of like opposite views on different things, right? For example, like, you're not going to suddenly code your own engine for fun.
Right.
Because whereas I'm like, no, why would you not code your own engine? It's wonderful and lovely. And like, can't you tell the difference between a handcrafted engine and like Unity? And like the opposite point of view is, can't you tell the difference, Cliff, between like AI art and a real artist, right? It's a different point of view. Like, I tick that box on Steam that says I use AI for some of my art. If people don't want to buy the game as a result, that's up to them. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go on some jihad saying you're all Luddites.
Right. I think it's being clear about it that is what's important to people. And then, they can commercially make that decision. I think hiding it would be, and I admire you coming on here to even mention that. But then, given what you've already told me about how you're planning on marketing things, I'm not surprised. So, there's this big brain moment of, have you just used AI art to create a... So, okay, that does look AI generated.
Yeah.
Like, that looks very...
It doesn't.
Right. But even, I would argue that even in the context of what your ships look like in the game, there is a disconnect, actually, between that style, and if you go back and click the other one, the AI generated one, is like, even you're saying it's been trained, these don't look as good.
Well, I tell you what is...
they're like too clean.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. But the thing is, if I showed you the art, I don't even have a build of it, so I must have somewhere. If I launched Gratuitous Space Battles, the original, and showed you the art, some of which was done by me in 3D Studio Max, which I didn't know how to use, right? You'd sort of think, holy shit, this was an actual game that actually shipped, because it looks so bad. Right.
But okay, so there's a question here, like, what stops you from having an artist doing this before you ship it, right? Because like I think there's an argument for having AI art in your game while you're developing the game. And you've built the, it's placeholder, it's in there, and then you get somebody to come in once because like the conceptual obviously if you can afford to pay somebody, you should be paying somebody, right? Because it's like, why not? You get also that there's a creative aspect to that, and I can understand your argument of just being introverted enough to not want to deal with people. So there's this like weird line. We're in a weird place where you can be one. It is not black and white, right? And I think that's important, and it's going to land somewhere. But for me, my argument would be like, okay, I can understand the prototypey while you're developing it space, but your ships look better than this AIR. And I would say, I think two things. I think you should get somebody to do it because you've defined what you want it to look like now, but getting somebody to match the art style of the ships will look better. But then on the other side, there's the argument of like, okay, but is that worth the time and money invested?
Well, the thing is, right? What you got to remember is you're chatting to someone in an unusual circumstance. Because I've made a load of games, I'm now making a game for fun, and I can do what I like.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to you. Yeah.
So, like, if like you put this on YouTube and there's 100 comments, and they all go, "Screw this guy! Look, go and leave a bad review." Blah blah. I don't care. I'm retired. Okay, I can do what I want. I do feel quite strongly about the whole AI thing, partly because I'm massively pro AI in general. The generative side of it is just one side of it. And I think we are like one miraculous step forward in like treating dementia or cancer that like Claude comes up with, where everyone's opinions will go, oh, yeah, well, actually, that's quite amazing kind of thing. I am very pro AI, but I can give you my controversial example, like from earlier when I'm trying to be provocative thing, if you like.
Go ahead.
Because this is, and I believe this is not me just trying to promote my game. I don't care about that. I'm doing this thing because it's you, right? I'm not like, what an opportunity.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
To like promote my game, because I'm not doing things like so here's what I'd say if I was Molyneux and I was trying to controversially defend my position. I would say that when I was growing up, my mother was a filing clerk, which is true, for a trade union. And my father worked for an engineering company where he was a draftsman, basically drawing technical schematics of dustbins and lights, right? Okay. AutoCAD put my dad out of work. And Windows File Manager, let alone File Explorer, put my mother out of work. And nobody gave a shit. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's quite a working class family. Now artists are being put out of work and everyone mans the barricades. Now I love artists and I have a lot of respect for art and I have a lot of respect for anything creative. Obviously, I run a creative business. But I sort of think, hang on, when did all the artists down tools to go on the picket lines because all the welders lost their jobs to those KUKA robots, right? My mother, all the filing clerks lost their job. Everyone in the typing pool lost their job when Wang came out with a word processor, right? My dad lost his job to AutoCAD. God knows how many other people are losing their jobs, blah, 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 blah. I tell you what AI is going to destroy everyone's job who works in a call center.
Yeah, well, already, yeah. I mean,
yeah, right. Very working class, and a lot of them are in another country, and so we don't give a shit. But so I kind of have to. I do have a lot of sympathy for the like, oh my god, like AI, but also I kind of think there needs to be another solution. I think other than pitchforks about AI, right? Because the economics are insane. So, like, I know, you would say it would be better if I want an artist to do this. I don't know, $80, $100, $50, $100, or 4 cents.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's
it's
crazy.
kind of
thing. But it is, keep in mind, like a lot of that cost is subsidized right now, and the actual economics of AI, the actual economics of AI companies is insane, and like no AI company is basically making money apart from Nvidia, which I think that's kind of the biggest thing with this is it's all just this like 2008 housing crisis nonsense that we're getting into, and I don't want this to turn into a big discussion about it because, like,
sure.
everybody is in their field about it. But I think it is just worth. Where I sit is we are currently in a situation where it's this new technology that is interesting and has some staying power and actually has utility, but a lot of the big players in the game are over-promising and under-delivering, and they're also trying to invent reasons for this stuff to exist that it doesn't actually yield, right? However, I spoke about this in the video I made on Unity's AI agentic stuff. There are genuine use cases for it that people will find. And to me, that's where I think it's going to eventually sit, is this like middleware business to business type stuff that, like you said, is call center operating stuff that's doing agentic, telemarketing. Fine, right? Like it's really good at that kind of stuff, but that's not how it's being sold to people. It's being sold to people as this pie in the sky, going to solve every problem in the world ever. And I think to me, that's where a lot of the big pushback comes. And again, I would like to not have this turn into a huge discussion, but I do think it's important to point out that like that's really the context in which I think a lot of the thoughts and feelings about it sit.
I mean, kind of like I mentioned on another topic earlier, like everyone's got their biases and their context. And like I was an AI coder in 1999 or whenever it was. Like democracy. I used to occasionally talk about democracy as being famous for being the first game that was ever the whole structure of the code is a neural network.
Right.
So, like, I've got history with this shit.
Yeah. Well, exactly. That's why I respect your opinion on it for sure. Like, it's interesting to talk about with you.
I think that the last thing I'll say about it, because everything AI gets controversial. But I think what is interesting to think about is where we've ended up. To me, just seems slightly random because it could have gone the other way. Right? Here's a completely opposite evolution of AI. Right? Where indie developers look at this and go, holy fuck. So I can put 50 times as much art in my game. I can suddenly have as much art as a studio 50 times my size from my budget. I can compete with these way bigger studios in terms of the amount of content. At last, let's do this. And where the big studios go, AI bad. No one is allowed to ship a game with like 5,000 backdrops in their visual novel unless they're Electronic Arts or BioWare, because we're the people with 500 staff. How dare you come along and challenge us on what used to be our turf, which is lots of content. I understand why it has gone the way it is, but I have some sympathy with someone who's like developing on their own and suddenly like, oh, I only had the budget for like 3 backdrops in my game. I now have the budget for 200. I can suddenly do a much bigger, bolder game. But the thing is, like, I'm an AI coder, like your art, right? The chances of us agreeing on this are like
it's
zero.
very nuanced. Well, look, I like to, I'm somebody who in this stuff, I'm trying to understand perspective. And I think it's important, especially for this, our industry. And I think one of the reasons we get along is I'm always somebody who like wants to hear arguments for and against things. Right. And because I think you can't just immediately. And like I said, I think there's a middle ground where it fits. I would push back on some of the stuff you said, but I do understand your, like, it's just nuance. And unfortunately, nuance gets lost entirely on the internet. And I think offline, we could have a much more detailed conversation about this. But I do think that to counter some of what you said, there is the thing about being a solo developer and having the constraints of not being able to make a million pieces of art.
Totally.
That will help you make a better game. Totally. So I mean, like, to some degree, you could argue that side of it too, is it's almost too kind of freeing that it just gets messy and, and
like it's absolutely a thing that like if you've got like your really cool art style that is not at all generic. Like I would say I was really trying to sell this game, right? I wouldn't say, hey Matt, you're going to really appreciate this game because the art style is just like so incredibly original. Because you'd sort of go, it looks just like generic AI art, Clev. I wouldn't pretend it doesn't. It's not my thing. But to some extent, I think artists who have a very definitive style should be leaning into it. Because
to train on their own styles, do you mean? And then
no, I don't mean leaning into AI. I mean leaning into the fact, like it's a selling point. Like everything's marketing.
It's
a selling point.
So like it's our own unique type of art, and that's what we should be selling for, rather than it's AI generated stuff.
Yeah, I don't mean in a Pitchforks way. I don't mean in a kind of like buy our game, it's made by humans, because that falls flat on me. Right, because like buy this mug, the pottery was made by an artisan. No, of course it was
machined, and
everything in my house was made by like a robot. Like I kind of I know everyone hates me for this. It's kind of it's just my it's just my personal opinion. But like I am unusual in that, and I am very autistic, and I have a certain mentality that I could happily sit and talk to Claude about normally investments or C++ for a long period. And to me, I find that very engaging and very interesting. And I don't find it kind of like icky. But what's really bad about generative AI, I think, in terms of artwork and stuff like that, is I think it has done a really bad PR job for the potentials of AI.
I agree with that. Yeah, I fully agree with that.
What I want is for Anthropic to not. Anthropics, they don't do art, right? But wouldn't it be great if, like, the big AI company said, "Here's our new model," and rather than going look at the video and the images, if they sort of said, "This is the disease we just cured."
Yeah, well, this was my point, right? the way that these big these big companies that are massively over leveraged are trying to make people care about it. And almost to your point of what you were talking about at the beginning of this show, right? That like they've just gone about saying, here's this thing that makes it really interesting, even though it's actually kind of generic and boring, versus like something that's actually cool and interesting that it could do that they never talk about. Like for me, for instance, one of the things I'm talking about, I would love a machine learned thing that just does UV unwrapping. No artist in the world has ever sat there and gone, you know what I love? I love UV unwrapping. Maybe if some people are like really, really big on the pixel side of it, but like an AI agent that can do UV unwrapping, probably quite trainable, and it's probably a thing that exists. But dude, where is it?
Think of all the people, and I've worked alongside them for a long time, who would sit there and do UV unwrapping or whatever. Like,
but those artists aren't going to say, oh, if it's UV unwrapping, I don't have a job, right? Nobody is a UV unwrapper, but having a tool that's an AI agent that can do that will speed them up to do their painting faster, or so there are art purposes that these AI tools. And I really hate that it's AI, because it's just ruined actually just like game AI too. I hate that this is now the language that we're using, but the generative AI tools, LLMs, have just been so... There is some great stuff underneath the mess that these big corporations have paid. And that's the bit to me that sucks, right? Because just objectively as a programmer in games, and I think if you are somebody that's working in games, you have to at least identify that, like, outside of the economical nonsense that these huge companies have done, local models that are more cheaply run could still be doing interesting things as tools on our devices.
Yeah, totally.
And we've just lost all that. That's just not happened.
Yeah. I mean,
but I think that's where we'll land. I think that's where it will land, and I'm hoping that we move that way. But look, it's very much leaning right now. To me, I'm seeing 2008 crisis type stuff happening here, because
it's
so over leveraged.
Some people, like, I'm very into my stocks. I have no Amazon, no Apple, no Microsoft, no Google. I don't have any of the Mac 7. I don't even have NVIDIA. I don't even have TSMC anymore. I have virtually nothing American for many reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who who knows? And like, to be honest with you, like if like in a month's time, I should mention the funny thing to you, right? Because when I was sort of saying, I don't know, I'm making a game, will I ever release it? Who cares? I do have a deadline, right? Which is, I think, October, November. But the reason I have a deadline is fucking comical, right? Because they announced an Auto Battlers sale on Steam.
Okay, so you're trying to get into the genre there.
I was rejected.
Wait, what?
Right. And I thought,
wait, what?
Hold on a moment. So I sent a message and, so saying like, I don't want to be that guy, but like I fucking invented this genre. And I think you'll find that you can prove that from like my own game on Steam that is clearly an auto battler in 20 whatever it was.
Yeah.
And was not labeled as such because there was no tag, because the game the genre had not been invented. And this is the spiritual successor to that, made by me, the same guy. Anyway, they approved it and it's in, right? And I think to myself, like, I cannot not be ready in time for a sale based on the genre. Like, and look, I don't know, maybe I'll give in to like other people's opinions. I'm not a hardcore obsessive. Maybe I will just get over my angst of not wanting to hire an artist, and I'll find an artist and go, look, this is what I've been sticking in screenshots. It's only these modules.
I think it's worthwhile. Trust me, just knowing what I know about the Steam market, and even looking at Crazy Taxi, who have come out and said, hey, in the new Crazy Taxi game, we've got generative AI. People have come to me and said, you don't have generative AI in your game, do you? Because Crazy Taxi has it. And they're trying to use that as a marketing point for me. And it's just like, there is a sentiment specifically on Steam right now where people want things crafted by humans. And it's from somebody put it, somebody I followed was that like computers are really good at playing chess against each other. I mean, ironically, we're talking about auto battlers, so it's interesting, but nobody really wants to sit and watch a tournament of two computers playing chess against each other, really, apart from a very small set of people.
The thing is,
people want human crafted. I know you might want to watch that, but like,
well, this is the thing. Like, this goes back to my earlier thing of like the reason. It's quite funny actually. The way I realized I was actually autistic, and when I look back at my dad was fairly autistic, and his dad was like non-verbal, right? The way I found out was one of my production line YouTube videos when I'm sort of talking about like route planning or something. I can't remember what it was, but it's something very complicated, right? And one of the comments on YouTube was like, oh, I love these videos, Cliff's interesting, whatever. And someone had replied saying, he's clearly weapons grade autistic though, right?
Okay.
And I shared this as a like funny comment to some friends who all said, well, yeah, assuming I knew. And and then you like look into it and everything, and this sort of thing. Oh yeah, clearly, obviously, this makes a lot of sense. So I know I'm out on the reservation. I'm on the far, like my favorite sci-fi writer is Ian Banks when he writes about AIs talking to each other.
Right.
So I'm really far removed from. I would happily sit and read a very, very long book that was written by AI if it was good. At no point would that devalue it for me. But then weirdly, but I totally understand because I used to be a musician, right? And when I listen to Dream Theater, I think, this is amazing because I know it's really hard and I know an actual human with the same number of fingers as me is doing it.
Yeah.
So I totally get it, and maybe I should just get over myself and stop being contrarian and just hire a fucking artist. I mean, like maybe. Yeah.
Well, I'll be interested. I'll be interested to see where you get with that. But I think we can probably start wrapping this up here.
Yeah.
I appreciate you going into details about this, and I'd be curious to see how the comments land on this because I think, like I said, I think it's a super gray area. And we're still in that space where it's a hot topic, right? And I think also because it hasn't landed yet, really, it's still in that space where it hasn't landed yet. So I'm curious to see, but I do know for sure that it's a very net negative on Steam.
Yeah, I totally know that.
Yeah, and so, looking at what you showed us, and I think it'll be interesting to see what people that have watched this think. considering you've only done a little bit using it, it makes sense to just kind of pay somebody to do it. I'd understand if like the entire game and it was this huge thing. It's just like, man, it would take you not that long to get that replaced, especially. But again, that's it. It's like it has that freedom to let you play around with it while you're working. So yeah, I'm just it's not something. The generative art stuff is something that I might use to mess around with concepts and things. Like I use it to help me figure out what thumbnails can look like because I freaking hate that part of YouTube. Right, so I will use it to be like, "Hey, give me an idea for this." Think of the thumbnail
artist, Matt. This is the hypocrisy.
But then I take what it's generated as the concept, and then I go and make my own version of it, right?
Yeah,
because just even that initial like ideation phase sucks, especially when it comes to thumbnails. Because I'll sit there in Photoshop for 4 hours making something, and it's just like, and I hate all of this, and I just wasted all of that time. Being able to save that time to me, like so. This is it. It's nuanced. It's just a nuanced thing.
Yeah, I'm sure that your comments will be really nuanced. It won't be. You know what? First, he mentioned Peter Thiel. Then he found a reason to mention Hitler for some reason, and then it was generative AI, and then he boasted about how much money he'd made.
We'll clip some of these for the shorts and just remove a bunch of the context and see what happens, right?
God.
So, yeah.
But that would actually make my earlier point, right? That
well, let's try it.
I think it would be hilarious if this was a really popular video, purely because of the soundbitey kind of Peter Thiel AI Hitler, you know, because it kind of proves the point that like you gotta. I don't know, you got to get noticed. I don't know. The last thing I will say, and then I'll shut up, right? I'll tell you what AI is brilliant for. Forget the generative shit. Financial stuff. Holy fuck. The Claude in 1 month saved me 1,000 times what it cost me that month in terms of finding errors made by my accountant just in that month.
Interesting. Okay.
You know, it knows the law, it knows the rules, it knows it can analyze stuff. Brilliant. I mean, like you check it afterwards.
Because it can still, no matter what, it can always like invent things. So
yeah, but yeah, like if you hate paying accountants and lawyers, and I think we can all hate that. Yeah, really good for that sort of stuff. I'm digging my hole worse. I'm making myself seem more and more unlikable.
Look,
what have I done?
I think if people have listened to this whole thing, I think there is some. Again, that's why I like doing this, because you get more into the weeds about things that just doesn't get shown necessarily in the same in the 2-minute, 3-minute clips that go around. So I appreciate you being so candid this entire time and sharing the stuff of the game. I mean, it looks fantastic. Even like knowing how much you've done, especially in the past. You are in a unique position, right? I think that's the thing. Is I would advise anybody listening to this that is relatively new to games to not touch some of that stuff just for now until it's settled a bit and we know more clearly what the space is. But everybody has their own, like you said, everybody has their own opinion on it, and everybody draws a line somewhere. That's kind of the thing too. Is like everyone has a line, and everyone's line is just one step lower than the other person's line, right?
It totally is, right?
You know, and it's
And I know this from politics. It's like taxes should go up on the rich. What's rich? Slightly more than I earn now. You know, if I get a pay rise, that thing will go up. Everyone is like that, and it's like that comment about my parents. It's kind of like when you say everyone draws their line, the line was definitely drawn after both my parents lost their jobs. Right? Where does the automation like become problematic? It's like when it affects me, you know. I have a lot of sympathy for your point of view, and I'm not wedded to like anything. And don't forget, I do just enjoy arguing. So that's
why I like talking to you. I enjoy our conversations because it's insightful. But you don't argue for the sake, like you have points, right? Like you think about this stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I appreciate. You're not arguing for the sake of it. You're arguing because it's one of the reasons I've always enjoyed talking to you is that we have this like thoughtful back and forth. And I hope people have listened to this and that's what they're getting from it. It's hopefully been a thoughtful discussion, and I think you and I do agree. I think on a lot more than we disagree on. So yeah, I think that's always worth remembering is that, like, no, this hasn't been a flame war and we're not enemies. We just have some disagreements on things. And I actually have a lot of respect for you, Cliff. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really pleased that you came on to this, especially early on in this podcast. And I appreciate you coming on and talking about the game. And thank you very much for giving your time. Do you have anything? By the time this will probably go out in a couple of weeks, so will you have the Steam page available by then?
Yeah, I mean, there is a Steam page.
Is it already up? Because I don't see it in your list on your on your Positech Games account. So I don't know if it's been published fully yet, but if it's published,
it's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then my other top tip. I mean, like, if you put in ridiculous, there's not that many games.
Okay.
Right.
Well, we'll put a link to the game in the description, and people can go and wishlist it and check it out if they want. Or just check out any of the other like Democracy 4. I helped you make the trailer for that, the original trailer for that, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah, you did.
So,
yes, you did. Yeah,
I'm proud of the work we did on that, and the game's great. And I love Democracy. Brilliant game. And well, I doubt this will be the last time we chat, because I think it's always great to talk to you. So
cool.
Is there anything else before we go?
No, I think I've offended everyone. I think my work here is done.
Thank you very much, Cliff. I appreciate it. So thank you for coming on, and I'll see you again next time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of About Game Dev. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, be sure to follow the podcast if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, or subscribe here on YouTube so you don't miss future episodes. And if you'd like to support the show, you can join the Patreon, where you'll get early access to every episode completely ad-free, along with all the other perks from my main channel. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.